Hello everybody and happy new year. This is Tekka, and in this video what I'm going to be doing is a reaction style video to the grand finale of the Daily Driver Challenge by Linus Tech Tips. I did a reaction to the very first one. I find reaction videos moderately cringy, so I didn't do any of the in-between ones, but this is the finale, so we might as well do it. And just like last time, don't watch the video through this video. Go watch this yourself because I'm going to be cutting stuff out. Yeah, so let's jump on into it. Here it is. Let's full screen it. And here we go. I'm excited.
There are a plethora of reasons to transition your daily driver gaming rig over to Linux.
You could be sticking it to the man.
Or wanting to support the open source community.
Maybe you daily drive Linux for work already.
And all your games are natively supported anyway.
Or maybe you just want a new and challenging hobby.
If all your games are already natively supported on Linux, then it is definitely a good move, and I think that you will have a lot of fun. But I haven't watched this, but we've progressively watched some of the other ones. If you don't have games that are natively available and aren't highly rated on Proton, chances are you're going to stick with Windows or just end up dual booting.
But if what you want is a simple, painless gaming experience, then let this be a cautionary tale. One of trials, tribulations, and of course, sponsors. Thanks to Arilo for sponsoring this video.
Okay.
But that didn't actually remedy the fact that I couldn't play games with my friends.
It's funny because I assumed that this...
Yeah, and that exactly goes to the point I just said. If you're playing those AAA multiplayer games and you have a group of people you play with, it's probably not the right move for you. I know the whole premise for this Daily Driver Challenge was ultimately gaming, but if you aren't mostly focused on gaming, like me personally, the only game I really ever play is Splitgate, which is a Linux native game, doesn't even need to use Proton, so I have a good time. But if you're not playing those AAA titles and you're not too picky on the exact games, Linux will be pretty fun. But as we'll see here, the contrary is also true.
I game mostly by myself as a way to relax or to hang out with my kids, and I am extremely flexible about what game I'll play. If something doesn't work, screw it.
I like how he says that, and one of his big complaints in I think it's the LAN show, was he couldn't, like, the main complaint is, like, it was with Bedrock Linux and he couldn't download it through the Microsoft Store. I mean...
Valve's goal of reaching 100% compatibility with the entire Steam game library is admirable. Actually,
yeah, it is.
Incredible.
That would be
as noted by
wonderful.
This Reddit post. But it's also not the silver bullet that it would have been 10 or even 5 years ago, when nearly every game worth playing was available on Steam.
Half of Twitch's top 20 games, at least at the time of filming this, are not on Steam.
Want to try one of my personal favorites, Crosscode? Click install, click play, and as simple as that.
Isn't it nice when it works like that?
I was amazed at how painlessly my Xbox One controller worked. Though
yeah, I got actually, speaking of, this is what I've been playing Splitgate with on Linux, by the way. Just plug and play, easy as that.
They seem to be solved now.
Yeah, I saw he was putting in custom variables. You do have to do that with some games. On the latest version of GNOME with Wayland, I'm not sure if it's just me or if it's happened to everybody, but I had to add a custom variable to actually make CSGO launch in full screen. Otherwise, it was like windowized and it was still full resolution, so it looked kind of weird. But yeah, that's something you may have to do here and there. Even if a game is natively available on Steam, there are some things you'll have to work around.
That could be an NVIDIA driver issue, or it could be something else entirely, but for me, it worked well enough that I didn't feel like digging.
It is probably NVIDIA driver, because I have both NVIDIA and AMD GPU.
Like this
one, I do notice some issues here and there, some differences between the two.
Massive respect to the incredible teams who have worked tirelessly to make running Windows games on Linux possible.
Yeah, big shout outs to everybody who takes the time, the effort, using your skills to advance Proton, Linux gaming, and everything forward. You guys are truly what makes this community great overall.
Valve's Proton compatibility layer is amazing. It's forked from Wine, which has been multiple decades in the making, with about half of its source code written by volunteers.
So I keep pausing. I remember the very first time I used Wine, it was actually a great success. It was on like Ubuntu version 8 point something. and I got, I think it was Microsoft Office 2003 working. It might have been 2007, probably 2003. But yeah, I thought that was one of the coolest things ever. It's a little difficult now, but yeah.
That's freaking wild. And of course, honorable mentions all around for the dedicated communities that maintain tools like Lutris, which automates hacky workarounds for newbies, and ProtonDB, which serves as both a troubleshooting resource and a reference for which games work, so you won't have to waste.
ProtonDB is one of my favorite things that's ever been created.
All of that work, we're honestly just not there yet.
Another problem that's been a thorn in the side of the Linux community for years is anti-cheat.
Yeah.
Now, the game launches.
It's the only reason I cannot play my Fall Guys.
He goes on to explain that while Linux gamers were a very vocal part of their pre-launch community, they accounted for less than 0.1% of sales.
Ooh.
Yet they generated more than 20% of auto-reported crashes and support tickets.
Yeah, that's a little
rough. He also stated that near the end of his time there, nearly 100% of tickets were still Linux related, despite Linux receiving the majority of the engineering effort. Meaning the company likely spent hundreds of thousands of dollars supporting a community that made them.
And it all comes down to economics. If it economically is not viable, it's just not gonna happen.
Problems like a few comments in the chat criticizing us for choosing to play that particular game because.
But that's what they wanted to play.
Just some crappy Java game. It's obscure, or because it's not fair to Linux, or.
Oh.
But the bottom line is that. But instead of doing that, we played Terminal Command Simulator. And honestly,
see, that's the difference between somebody like me and a lot of other people and Linus is I love when something goes wrong and you have to kind of tinker around and play with it to get it to work. Personally, I enjoy that, but I can see how a vast majority of people would not enjoy having to tinker with their system in order to get basic things to work that should just work.
Like, this has got to be how a
yeah, and I think it was Linux for Everybody. Linux for Everybody did a couple good. Linux for Everybody is a good source for gaming stuff. Lots of different comparisons. Yeah, there's a lot of these Will It Linux videos, so I would recommend you guys check this out if you are into Linux gaming.
To be clear, I would never say that just because some old game doesn't run, it means that Linux sucks. In fact, I've permanently switched my laptop over to Linux because there are a lot of things it just does really well, even for someone more on the noob side of things like me. What it does mean is that gaming on Linux can kind of suck. Anything that relies on an external service that updates independently of your computer can just unexpectedly break, and that's a lot of games.
Yeah, that's one of the worst things is you have something on your system and it could be something like Kdenlive, even a non-gaming thing, and everything works good, and then they release an update and it breaks something else that you relied on. Very frustrating when things like that happen.
So you always need to make sure that you read, especially the recent comments, rather than just relying on the rating on ProtonDB. Another prime example of this is Minecraft Dungeons. Works great, apparently. Well, as long as you happen to own it through Steam, rather than through Microsoft directly with the old launcher. Because in that case, apparently you can make it work. But for most people, I think it's safe to say that you're just going to have to rebuy the game. So I haven't been able to play that with my kids in a month.
That ended up being an
okay. I know in general, like, you don't want to rebuy your games. If you want to play a game with your kids and your kids, like, you want to play it with your children, rebuy it. Sorry.
Luke and I had some awesome Don't Starve Together sessions. Totally
That's
stable,
a wonderful
no crashes,
game, by the way.
And more recently,
would
my
recommend.
Son and overall, I'm really happy I did the challenge. I learned a lot, and it gave me a lot of hope for the future. And I will absolutely be trying to stick with Linux when the Steam Deck shows up sometime next year. But to summarize the question that we set out to answer, is this the year of the Linux desktop? For gamers, the answer is no. I'm sorry. And the more niche your use case gets, maybe you're super into modding or the racing or flight sim scene.
Yeah, good luck with that.
And if I'm being honest, I'm in the same camp. But something has given me a lot of hope, and that's how much positivity we've seen from the Linux community in spite of our concerns. because even if I'm
got
not
Gardner,
ready to
and
convert
that
my
was
gaming rig
Linux
just
for
yet,
everybody
it
that I
gives
was
me
just
hope
talking
that
about.
one day the meme will end and the year of the Linux desktop will come. I'm as anti-monopoly as anyone, and I'd hate to see the status quo maintained forever.
Now that the challenge is over,
Cool.
it's time to go back and watch the previous parts, because while the overall conclusion was...
Yeah, no, I'll pass on that. So that was the Linus Tech Tips, the grand finale to their Linux Daily Driver Challenge, with an obvious emphasis on gaming. Now, you can call it unfair, you can call them unreasonable here and there, but every single point that they made is completely valid, and I think they were honestly being a lot nicer than they could have been, and still being more than just to Linux as a whole. Somebody like me, I'm not really that much of a gamer, so I don't nearly express these same type of concerns and problems that they do. Like I said a couple times, I just play Splitgate. I don't really play much with like friends online. It's just not something that my use case depends on. My thing is media and content creation generally. So there are a ton of fabulous tools and programs that will allow me to do what I need to do on Linux. And the big thing driving that is the availability of DaVinci Resolve. It's a like Hollywood grade media editing suite that works wonderful. If you are a programmer or developer, Linux is a wonderful place to be. And of course, if you're somebody who just has general simple tasks like word processing, web browsing, stuff like that, Linux is going to be good for you. But gaming is one of those things that is going to continue being a challenge going forward, and it's going to be a good while before before that's no longer the case. And like they mentioned in that video, just because all the games on Steam work doesn't mean that a lot of the games that are actually played by a lot of people are going to work very well. For example, one of my friends, Matt, he is a Call of Duty fanboy, and I don't think that Call of Duty games really, or at least the companies that develop the Call of Duty games, have too much of an incentive to make sure that it just works good with Linux. It's absolutely not there. And that's because a lot of people who are gaming are just getting gaming PCs, already has Windows on it, and everything just works. So generally, if gaming is your focus, there is really not a reason to switch over to Linux, unless if you want the tinkering aspect, the customization aspect, or if you have a philosophy against Windows and how they work, which is a lot of the active Linux community today. And a lot of people generally do not care enough about their philosophies and principles to make the switch over to Linux for that reason. So until things are a lot better, honestly, I completely agree with everything that was brought up in the Linus Tech Tips video. There are some complaints that were a little like, come on. But overall, I agree. With that, if you're interested in seeing the very first part of my reaction to this, I'll link that down below. I didn't react to any of the other videos because, like I said, and if you're interested in learning more about Linux and checking out some Linux content, check out my channel, subscribe, ring that bell. There is a lot of good things coming. With all that, I'd love to thank our YouTube members and Patreon supporters. You guys are fantastic. Thank you to anybody who watches this, supports the channel. Again, I hope you have an absolutely wonderful start to your new year, and goodbye.